Welcome everyone to this Tourbit Core Digital Skills webinar. My name is Anu and I will be hosting you through this webinar. This is already the 7th webinar of the series. Previously, we've been talking about digital marketing and data management. And this webinar today finalizes the data management series with cybersecurity expertise that we have now here today. Today's speaker, we have Juan Tourbit. I hope I could pronounce your name correctly. He is the director of the IT and OT security unit in Eureka. And today we will shed some light to cybersecurity issues and demystify cybersecurity and hear a little what it means and what we need to know about it in today's changing landscape, especially of course in tourism. As usual, we will record this session and you will be able to watch it later on Tourbit website. The webinar will run so that first we will have a presentation from Juan, and after that we will have some time for questions. But without further ado, I will give the floor to you, Juan, and then we can continue from there.
Okay, thank you, Anu, for the presentation. Good morning, everyone. I share my screen. Okay, so you can see it. Yes. Well, as Anu commented, we have a webinar, a short webinar about cybersecurity. Okay, the objective of this webinar is to explain a little bit what is cybersecurity in a big picture. Okay, understand what's the domain we work on cybersecurity, and also, as Anu commented, demystifying a little bit the cybersecurity sector, or the people who works in this sector. And of course, understand the threats, the malicious actors that are behind the attacks and these data breaches or ransomwares, etc., and explain some tips and actions that we should follow. You should perform to reduce the risk to be a victim of a cyber incident. Okay. Well, first of all, I commented. The idea is to demystify a little bit, the cybersecurity sector. Today in cybersecurity, there are many different professional profiles working on the sector, from in different tasks, working with different kind of data information or technologies, and the image, or the traditional image of cybersecurity people is that people working on code, computers, but well, as I said, cybersecurity is more than these people, And to start, I think it's important also to define what is cybersecurity. Of course, we can define cybersecurity then using many different ways, but of course, cybersecurity is not bad news. It's not only cyber attacks or all we can read or see at the TV or in the newspapers, etc., about attacks, ransomware, data breaches, etc. Cybersecurity is the practice of protecting any digital asset, okay, systems, devices, applications, data, any digital asset before, during, and after a cyber incident, not only a cyber attack. It's we in cybersecurity, we work thinking cyber incidents, any problem related with security, consequence of an attack, third-party action or malicious action, or not, because sometimes we can have a security problem for the provoked by the action of a user, etc., in not with a malicious objective. Okay, and also important these three words, before, during, and after. Okay, that's important because traditionally, maybe 10 years ago or more, cybersecurity or the practice of protecting was very focused on prevention. Okay, prevent the access of our infrastructure by a cyber attack, prevent the access to certain data, etc. But today, the complexity of the environments, the technological environments, the quantity of attackers with big resources, etc. Well, provoke that we have a situation where we have to assume that in some situation, in some time, we will have a victim. We will be a victim of an attack. Okay, and that for this reason, it's important to talk about before the cyber incident. We have to continue working on prevention, but we have to have tools and procedures, etc., to detect the attacks as soon as possible and respond to this attack, and then recover our systems, our company for the attack. Okay, and that's important today in cybersecurity, to cover all these, as we will see, all these different phases of an incident. Okay, and all these actions, we can perform to prevent, to detect, to protect, to respond, etc. They have a unique objective: is to reduce the risk in cybersecurity. We have to assume that 100 cybersecurity, it's impossible. Any device, any system, any procedure can be attacked, and we have to work to reduce the probability to have an attack. But it's impossible to reduce the probability of the risk to zero. Okay, but that's the objective. And to reduce the risk and accomplish a good level of cybersecurity, we have to take into account three factors, three main important factors in cybersecurity. That's our technology, of course. Cybersecurity is related to computers, networks, internet, etc., and software and hardware. We have to take into account technology, but also processes and people. It's impossible to guarantee an adequate or minimum level of security in a company without considering people and processes. Okay, in the case of processes, we can differentiate two different kind of processes: the processes of the company. In this case, any company or any process in a company today, or most of the processes, use technology. Okay, and for the reason we have to consider, or we have to take into account the threats of this technology when we define or redefine the process, to guarantee that this process is robust to the threats of the technology. And also we have to define, we have to follow procedures, processes about cybersecurity, how we have to respond to an attack. Okay, we have to have response plans. We have to define how we have to manage passwords, how we have to update systems, etc. We have to define procedures. And of course, finally, we have to consider, or we have to dedicate many efforts to people. Okay, training people, providing awareness activities, etc. Because we people know we are the main problem is not maybe the word, but it's what the attackers use in most of the cases to enter to a company, to provide some or install some malicious software, to store some data, or maybe to receive a transaction. We are the weakest point of the chain, no? And what it's very important when we have to work on this on mind. And for this reason, we have to provide training activities, awareness activities, but also tools for people to minimize the risk, the exposure where we work. Basically, we interact with the technologies, the email, the computer, web applications, etc. Okay, and that's an important, very important point in cybersecurity. Okay, only to finally explain that what is cybersecurity. Here we have a map of where we can see the different domains we have within cybersecurity. Traditionally, we said well, someone is a cybersecurity expert. Okay, today it's we don't have cybersecurity experts. We have experts in different domains within cybersecurity. 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 domains, but it's very, very difficult to be an expert in all the domains we have in cybersecurity. Okay, I think it's a complete map. We have different the more traditionals maybe are the domains related with technology. This one, security architecture, or related to software development, risk management, etc., etc. We have different domains, and for this reason, it's very important not to professional people that want to start their career in cybersecurity to understand this situation or this ecosystem, because in each of these domains we need to work people with different backgrounds, with different skills, and it's very important to have this all these different domains in the ecosystem. Okay. For this reason, or in this sense, European Commission, specifically the European Union Agency for Cybersecurity, ENISA, is working on defining a framework of different professional profiles in cybersecurity. In this case, they have defined 12 different profiles, professional profiles within cybersecurity that we can map in this ecosystem of these different domains. Okay, these are the 12 professional profiles that are covering all these domains I introduced before. No? Well, that's only to show the big picture of cybersecurity, and said that we need professionals in cybersecurity. It's a very demanding profession, but we need different profiles within within cybersecurity. People with skills in data science, people with skills in software development, risk management, laws, etc., etc. Okay, and that's important. There are many opportunities in this sense in cybersecurity. Okay, but if we come back to the definition of cybersecurity, we have to define what is protect, or what it means to protect. Okay, protect, it's in cybersecurity, is guarantee one or several information security principles. Okay, in concrete, we have 8 security principles. These are the 8 security principles that we have to we can guarantee in the different situations we need to protect some asset. Okay, of course, we don't have to guarantee the 8 principles in all situations. Okay, we have to guarantee the principles that provide the level of security you need in each situation. Okay, the principles are confidentiality, authenticity. Confidentiality is that someone without the permissions can access some data. Availability is the availability of a system. Cybersecurity systems, and not only cybersecurity systems, availability in general, any system, device, etc. In cybersecurity, we monitor and we try to have the systems 100% of the time available. Okay, authenticity provides that, or guarantee that some document, some server, etc. is authentic. It's authentic. Integrity, guarantee that some document, some data is not has not been modified. Okay, non-repudiation. Non-repudiation is provide non-repudiation is that guarantee that someone that has some action in internet, in the digital environments, and the day before or the day after, sorry, they say, oh, I don't know, I can, or I didn't see this document, or etc. No, and the non-repudiation can be guaranteed, for instance, and in this case, the tool that we use to guarantee this principle is the digital signature. Digital signature guarantee that okay, you have seen this document at this moment. Okay, tomorrow you can't say that you don't know how the document is seen with your name. Okay. Authorization, guarantee that only the users or the devices with the permissions can access to certain resource, okay, data, etc. Auditability, the capability to know what happened in a system, for instance, 1 week ago, etc. And accountability. It's also one of the principles we want to, or we need to guarantee in cybersecurity. But as I commented, we have not to guarantee all the principles in all situations, but we have some principles that are more important than others in certain situations. For instance, in general, in IT environments, environments related with information technologies, the main or the most important principles are the triad, I said, that is confidentiality, integrity, and availability. That's the three most important principles in this kind of environments. Confidentiality, guarantee that data is not visible for other persons than the owner, for instance. Integrity of data and availability. For instance, this is the priority that it's guaranteed in maybe in a financial office, virtual office. But if we we think about for instance a manufacturing company or a car manufacturer, in these cases the priorities change. Okay, the priority change because in general in manufacturer sectors the most important principle is the availability. Okay, because if we talk about the car manufacturing, okay, the most important thing is that the manufacturer works 24 hours, 7 days per week, and the availability of the systems, it's very, very important. Then, of course, the integrity of data, the machines change, etc. It's important, and then maybe the confidentiality is not the most important principle, because maybe the data we change in these kind of environments, infrastructures, if we extract this information of this infrastructure, maybe the meaning of the data is not relevant. Okay, and that's important. In cybersecurity, we have to guarantee these 8 principles of security, but not all the principles in all situations, and then the priorities in each case is different. Okay, and the other question, or the other important thing is, okay, we have to guarantee, protect is guarantee some important principles of security, but okay, how we do that? Okay, how do we protect or how we guarantee these principles? Okay. Well, in this case, we used 3 different concepts or different assets. One of them is the policies. It's very, very important to define policies that then are used to define procedures. Okay, because the policy it's the guides that we follow to accomplish the objective we have in these policies, and the policy is like what's our objectives in cybersecurity, and how or until where we want to arrive in cybersecurity in a period of time, thinking in 3 years maybe later. The procedures, like I commented before, no, the procedure is how we have to do or to apply, no, the different actions or how we can do the different things. And it's important that we define the procedures. The procedures can change, not every day, but can change, you know, in some months, etc., because depending of the context or the situation, etc. But always we define the procedures following the policies we have defined in the company. Okay, and then of course we use technology, we use tools to protect data, to monitor systems, to detect intrusions, to manage access control systems, etc., etc. Okay, of course we use a lot of technology, a lot of tools, software tools, hardware tools, of course, always, firewalls, etc. Okay, and always with some principles in mind. Today it's very important to, when we define or we start a project, internal project in a company, or project related with mainly projects related with the digital transformation, etc. It's very, very important to have the security and privacy in mind from the beginning of the project. As we said, privacy and security by design. We have to consider security requirements, privacy requirements from the beginning of the project, and design the solutions, design if we define a product, if we define a procedure, if we define any project related with technology, with data, etc., have to take into account cybersecurity from the beginning of the project. Okay, it's the cheapest solution, or the cheapest way to obtain or to guarantee the minimum security level in these projects. Okay, and and at what time we have to consider or to apply all these tools, all these procedures, etc. It's, well, today cybersecurity, it's a continuous process over time. We have to perform actions continuously, and every company have to be prepared to respond to an incident at any time. For instance, we have to consider that attackers when an attacker prepare a specific attack or to a company, they usually attack Friday night. Okay, it's when many people is on holiday. It's on in the weekend, and systems are monitored by few people, or in some cases it's not monitored, and it's the moment when the companies can be attacked with higher probability. Okay, and well, in this case, we have different frameworks that guide companies to manage cybersecurity. In this case, this is a NIST cybersecurity framework from the NIST, the U.S. National Institute of Standards and Technology. In this case, this framework, the second version of this framework, defines six phases or six actions. Identify. We have to identify vulnerabilities, identify new threats, identify points of to act to guarantee or to improve our level of security. We have to protect actions. Always we have to perform actions to improve our protection. Then, as I commented, we have to detect at any time or continuously, response, recover, and also all these actions or different actions focus on these different phases of different, or these 5 different situations. We have a transversal action that is govern all these different kind of actions to perform to manage the cybersecurity in a good way. Okay, that's how the companies have to manage the cybersecurity. This is an example of framework, but it's maybe the most important or the most used framework in cybersecurity in the world. Okay. Okay, but now if we talk about attackers or threats, it's important to understand or to know what's the motivation of the attackers, because finally, depending on the motivation of the attackers, we can expect one actions or another actions, or the victims of this kind of attackers can be different depending of the motivation, of course. And well, in this case, I divide the different cyber attacks we can observe in internet today. We divide these actions in 5 groups of, depending on the motivation behind these attacks. Okay, the first one is hacktivism. Hacktivism is this in Spanish. Sorry, hacktivism. Hacktivism is well, actions where the attackers theoretically doesn't obtain a personal benefit. Okay, they attack to provide maybe that a company is using maybe some, or they have relations with certain countries, or they are doing actions that affect the environment, etc. No, it's are cyber attacks, are illegal actions. Okay, but the objective is reivindication. Okay, that's one of the 5 groups. The second one is cyber war. Okay, all the actions related with a conflict, a cyber war. Okay, today any war have the digital component. No, or today it's impossible to imagine a conflict without the cyber, no, the cyber war, no, to obtain data, to destroy an infrastructure, etc. Okay, the third one is cyber terrorism. Okay, cyber terrorism is well, it's the objective is terrorist action, but in the cyberspace. Okay, hopefully, well, we don't see many actions in this group or with this motivation, but it's something that it's probably will grow in the future. Okay, unfortunately. The fourth one is all the actions related to espionage, cyber espionage is, well, stole data, information. Information is power, no? Well, all the actions related to obtain data, information. Of course, in cyber war, one part of the actions related to cyber war are related to cyber espionage. Okay, it's this a relation here, but well, cyber espionage in general, it's you can imagine, no, countries, politicians, companies obtaining information from other companies, from users or potential users or clients, etc., etc. And the last one is cybercrime. Cybercrime are the most of the actions we can observe in internet, malicious actions, attacks, etc., are related to cybercrime. Cybercrime, it's well, today cybercrime is very organized. Exist organizations focus only on cybercrime. They are very they are focused on, or they exploit the expertise of the people. People is focused on actions they are expert, and then we have different profiles as a company, a cybersecurity company, but in the other side of the law, and they are very organized, and today they have many resources, and they earn a lot of money. They earn a lot of money, and that's one of the main problems at this moment in cybersecurity, is that attackers have many resources to perform the attacks, and it's one of the main important things. No? What they stole regarding data? Well, all data you can imagine is stolen by the cyber criminals. Personal information, intellectual property or industrial property. Of course, all information related to payment systems, credit card numbers, etc., and also information related with health. Okay, that's why we see news related to attacks to universities, hospitals, public administrations, etc., because the attackers, cyber criminals, stole data, personal information, stole intellectual property, stole health information, stole payment information related to payment systems. That's the way the main objectives in today are this kind of companies or organizations, but all of us can be a victim of these attacks, because all of us have information, personal information, we have payment systems, we have all this kind of information, okay? And in internet, unfortunately, in the dark web, they can sell off this information and earn money for that, okay? That's the problem, okay? Today, we can we can see or any kind of data can be selling in the dark web, and that's also a big problem, okay? Or personal information, certifications, or service accounts, medical records, IDs, etc., etc. Okay, all the information, all kind of information can be sell in the dark web. Okay, that's one of the problem, and well, this is one of the reasons because all of us can be victim of a cyber attack. Any of us have information that can be, or data can be, that can be sold in the dark web. Okay, and many of the attacks today to stole data, that one of the most important cyber crimes in internet is the stealing of data. And in this case, most of them, of course, they are there are the specific attacks to specific companies or organizations, hospitals, public administrations, universities, etc. But most of the attacks are, as we said, general campaigns where attackers try to attack any kind of victim. And in this case, okay, all of us receive every day SMS, emails, etc., where they try to obtain some information for us, or that we clicked in some link, etc. And in this case, there are you have some statistics. In this case, it's from USA. The attackers, we consider that they send daily 75 million of emails as phishing emails. 75 million of this kind of emails. Of course, the percentage of victims is minimum. Okay, but the problem is that if they send 75 million of this kind of emails, for instance, okay, we have around 2,000 victims daily. That's the problem. In the big, the big picture, it's that it's the number of victims around the world every day is huge, is considerable. Okay, and the problem is that they can every day perform, or they can send millions of tens of millions of intents of attacks. Okay, and what's the most frequent cyber crimes? Fraud, all type of fraud, use of malware software, malicious software that can be installed in our devices, and also the third one is the installation of the exploitation, of vulnerabilities. Okay, the exploitation of vulnerabilities in our devices, in our systems, in smartphones, etc. Any device, any system, or every day we can find new vulnerabilities in the systems, in the devices, and that's the reason why we always recommend to maintain updated our devices, our systems, because the updates are very related with the mitigation of these vulnerabilities. And well, if we want to have our devices, our applications secure, we have to maintain it updated. It's very, very, very important. Okay, and finally, the last one slide is some tips to protect our business, but some of them apply in personal, or daily work. This we have 10. Maybe there are some more tips, but one of them is implement a strong password policies, or or focus on the security of the passwords. Not provide passwords in certain applications. Don't answer or don't send passwords by email and any other messaging application, etc. update software regularly, as I commented before. Use multi-factor authentication. Okay, the problem of the password is that attackers stole passwords mainly by phishing attacks, and the problem is that you have 100 employees, only one victim can compromise your company, and that's it's impossible to guarantee that all the employees don't provide their credentials in a fake web page, etc. For this reason, it's very important to provide technology to avoid or to protect these kind of actions, the phishing attacks. And multi-factor authentication is very, very important today. Or, okay, secure networks, Wi-Fi networks, etc. Educate employees, as I commented before. Train awareness activities are very important. Backup data regularly. It's very important today. I'm sure that you have seen a lot of news related to ransomware attacks. Ransomware that compromise or cipher data, and in this case, the only way is to have a backup data, a backup, and restore the data, or limit the access to the resources to only the users or the devices or the systems that need access to this data, to minimize the exposure of the resources. Use tools or technology to improve your capacity to detect threat, to detect incidents, cyber incidents, and then have the capability to react or to respond to these attacks. Perform regular security assessments, okay, of your infrastructure, your technology, and also create an incident response plan. It's very, very important to have a plan, a predefined plan to respond an attack, because where you are victim of an attack or incident, well, in that moment, or these moments are difficult situation where people is nervous with it's very difficult to take decisions, and in this case you have to have clear who have to do that, what, etc. No? The responsibilities, etc. You have to predefine all these things, because where the incident is in your company, it's very difficult to take decisions. Okay, and I think it's the last one. Yes. Thank you for your attention. That's if you have any question, I think we have some minutes. No.
Yes, thank you very much. Very thought-provoking presentation. If we have any questions, you can shoot. And if not, I always, as usual, have many questions. But I will pose one to you, concerning the future of cybersecurity. Because you've been working on this topic for a while, I suppose. So have you seen any change, and do you expect anything to change in the future concerning the needs, or as you said, that maybe the amount of cybercrime will grow even? But do you see any other, for example, now that artificial intelligence is becoming more and more popular? So do you have any advice what to keep an eye on for the future?
Yeah, it's how we see this future is it's complicated because I think it's or today is as with artificial intelligence, blockchain, we are using more and more technologies, different technologies, new technologies, and well, the use of new technologies also all the technologies, all technologies have threats, have vulnerabilities, and we have to take into account this point. No, it's okay. We can use new technology because it provides no benefits in efficiency or etc. But we have to also manage the vulnerabilities, the threats related to this new technology, and I think that it's very important to maintain or to dedicate resources not only to improve your efficiency, effectivity with new technology, etc., but also in parallel improve your resources to guarantee that these new technologies provide the benefits in a secure way. I think it's very important. Not only think about the benefits of the technologies, but also see or be aware that it's important to manage this point. It's something that when we have to the cybersecurity has changed during these last maybe 10 years because some years ago response an incident was something strange or something special, but today and in the future response an incident will be something normal because the number of incidents will grow, and people that is working in cybersecurity will respond incidents every day. That's our future. But well, it's I think it's the reality, and we have to be prepared to detect and respond to the possible incidents in a best way. Because I think it's very, I think it's impossible in a short term to reduce the number of cyber attacks, cyber incidents, etc. We have to improve our capabilities to, of course, the prevention is very important, but as I commented before, we have to assume that the attackers, the attacks will continue, and we have to improve our capabilities to respond to these situations.
Okay, yes, I think you're absolutely right, and this is a very nice way to end also this webinar. So basically, with this kind of a thought of being able to respond and act in case you face this kind of situations. All right, now we have content, and we thank you very much, Juan, for your time and your expertise. And we still have 2 more webinars coming up next month in Tourbit, so these good expertise will be shared on those as well. Okay, from my side, I wish you all a very nice day and a happy week. Thank you for your attention. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.